Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. You can find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. My guest today, founder and facilitator of Be in Space, Humanistic, psychologist, writer, podcaster of Truth and Transcendence, which is in the top 5% of podcasts internationally. Great achievement. Conscious dance facilitator, Pellowah, teacher, transformational coach, and more importantly, a cat person, which I always like. So with people listening to this, they'll probably need the translation subtitles for my Irish accent, because a lot of people ask me kind of slow down and everything. But my guest, she speaks beautiful and clearly with her English accent, even though she's in rural Wales. Please welcome Catherine Llewellyn.
Thank you, Roy. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm, in fact, Scots by heritage. I have a Welsh name and an English accent. So how about that? Just to keep people on their toes.
Interesting. And I've got, in generations back, Welsh and also Scottish as well. So it's a bit, as we say, I'm a mongrel. There's a bit of everything in me, like so. But I think that makes you stronger.
Totally. And more creative and less predictable.
Exactly. So let's start off with something interesting. I've had cats all my life, and even here where I'm living, there was a few wild cats. They wouldn't come in, but it was like I used to always feed them, and they'd look in as if like thanking me. But if I went near them, they'd hiss and everything. But you've got 4 cats. Have you always been a cat person?
One of them was exactly like that. The recent one he joined was he was a feral cat who was terrorizing the village. You know, oh no, he's come and stolen up my cat's food. He's beaten up my cat. I've had to take him to the vet. You know, he was like a violent, marauding predator, this cat. And I saw it and I went, that looks like a beautiful cat that just needs some love. And I found out that his owners had got this cat as a kitten, refused to let him in the house and refused to feed him because they said he's a cat. And he turned into this, you know, very inconvenient, annoying creature. So I trapped it and brought him in and seduced him, basically, and now he's complete pussycat. And the other 3 were all sort of from rescue situations.
I actually tried that one thing because my youngest son, he's 11. I don't know, this was maybe 2 years ago. And one of them was smaller. It was the female. It looked like he kind of mixed between kitten and adult, teenager, let's call it. And, you know, sometimes they just kind of pop their head in, and one day we left them in and closed the door, thinking that we'd actually be able to get a cuddle off him. And it was like something out of The Exorcism. He was jumping up. He was able to hit the top of above the door, the porch. Like, it scared the 2 of us. So we never tried to bring him in after that. But I used to have cats when I was younger, and one of them used to go around to the front of my motorbike, sit on the motorbike. So I'd give it a rub and then just go around back to the back of the house. Like, so I've always loved the cats.
They are amazing. And the one, what you said about that cat, that the one I adopted recently, who's actually got a heart on his back, which is just the most beautiful thing. I did trap him in the house once before, and I came down in the morning and the cat flat was in pieces on the floor. And he just completely destroyed the cat flat and got out. And I went, right, that's not going to work. So they are. No, I tell you what, they keep me sane because they have no ego drama. You know, they'll fight each other and then they'll cuddle with each other. They're over it. They don't have all the human nonsense that keeps us trapped in our head and trapped in our patterns and issues and neuroses. They're completely in the moment and they really know how to relax. So for me, that's such a good reminder. You know, if I'm getting into a bad, insane mode in my head, a cat just comes up and looks at me and I'm like, oh, right, I'll follow your example, not mine.
Excellent. So Catherine, you're doing a load of different things. And I'd love to know your journey, how you got into what you're doing at the moment, like your journey into everything.
Wow. Well, how long have you got?
Plenty of time.
I had a very unusual upbringing. My parents had both kind of run away from their expected path. You know, my mother was from an aristocratic family. She was supposed to marry another aristocrat and, you know, probably be some sort of hostess wife, that kind of thing. But no, She ran away to Chelsea and became an artist in the 1950s, which in those days was just not done. And my father was the opposite end. His family were in the shipyards in Scotland, the Firth of Forth up there. And he was supposed to stay working there. No, got a qualification, got a, what do you call it? A grant, you know, to go to college in London, became a civil engineer, met my mother. And they married to the shock of both families. They were very, very free-thinking, free-spirited, quite bohemian people, and they brought us up in that way. So we were encouraged to think for ourselves, be real, not trust the experts, don't trust all the institutions to tell you how to live your life, be creative, be expressive, be unpredictable, take risks, you know, right from the very beginning. So I always had this sort of sense of inner freedom, you know, that I really could follow my own light, if you like. Then, of course, after I left home, I hit, you know, before I left home, I hit puberty. I went through adolescence, and I went through that whole period of time of where suddenly other people's approval really mattered, especially boys, you know, and I was really wanting to fit in. And that clashed with what I'd learned as a child. You know, it's like, how do I really be myself, but also how do I get all this kind of popularity and acceptance that I'm craving as a sort of developing person? And that was a conflict for me. And meanwhile, I was having all sorts of interesting and fun experiences involving all sorts of things that one does as an adolescent. And then the next thing happened was some friends of mine disappeared away one weekend and came back. And they'd changed in a very positive way. And I ended up doing what they'd done, which was a very intense enlightenment weekend, which was called Exegesis. And that was my first introduction to sort of organized personal development work, of really going within and examining who I am, what is my nonsense about my ego stuff, my emotional, my resistances, my creativity, you know, all of that. And how can I take responsibility for it and choose the life I want? I was 24 when I did that. And not long after that, I started working with a bunch of people who'd done that same weekend. And we started going out and saying, someone got the idea of doing telephone marketing for clients because, we're great on the phone, we're really enthusiastic, and we really know how to make contact with people because we're so present, because we're so connected to our passion and our responsibility, etc. We did really, really well and won awards and started building call centers. And we were the first call center builders in the UK and literally doing very, very well. And not long after we started that, we realized we needed to train our people. We were recruiting our families and our friends and our ex-boyfriends. No one's any good on the phone. We've got to teach them. I don't know how I became a communication skills trainer at the age of 25, doing voice work. And this was sort of somatic voice work, you know, where you really go into the body and you're like breaking through, and people are crying and screaming, and their voices are like going more and more resonant. You know, they're getting away from the surface social voice and into the real body voice. 25, 26 years old. And anyway, that progressed over time. I started training in other communication skills, and then like management skills, team building skills. And 16 years later, I was working at board level with clients because they'd implemented a lot of what we were offering. And they kept saying, well, we don't know how to manage these people you've trained. They're completely unmanageable. They're too spontaneous. So we had to train them how to be an authentic leader and how to lead change. And then I left in 1996, set up on my own and I continued with coaching at board level, team work. And alongside it, I was learning about conscious dance, which was so much fun for me and really contributed to my work. And I was learning about energy healing. I started with Reiki, became a Reiki master, and then later on became a Pellowah practitioner and then a Pellowah teacher. And it all kind of moved along until eventually I left the corporate work. I'd had enough. I was too old for all the traveling, and I didn't want to see another hotel room again or another boardroom. So I set up on my own. So now I'm running Pellowah workshops, freedom of spirit workshops, which I'd love to talk more about. And I'm doing transformational coaching. And I work with anyone who wants to come to me and is interested in doing work. And I have a podcast, as you mentioned, which started in the middle of the lockdowns because I was just going insane. I was so angry at what was going on and frustrated. And I knew I wasn't going to go and try and tackle government on my own. That wasn't my path. So I thought, what am I going to do? I'm not allowed to see clients. What am I going to do? I'll start a podcast. So I started it really out of frustration, but then I began to love it. And now it's become a massive part of my life, which is how I met you, Roy, when you came on as a guest. So how was that as a summary of the last several decades?
Oh, it's fascinating, and I mean, even with the call centers, you were teaching people, how to do it properly and everything. And I knew a few people here because there's a few in Łódź in Poland, and they all hate it. Like, I don't think the train. It's like there was a 50% turnover rate, so you would think that they would master the skills of having people come in, love what they're doing. But it seems like, unfortunately, a lot of them, they just chug through them and just, you either sink or swim. And yeah. So you've obviously seen how it's kind of evolved over the years. You would think it'd get better.
We were so different from that. We turned the phoning experience into a personal development experience for people. Each group of 10 people had a coach working with them all day. Giving them shoulder massages and coaching them and encouraging them. We'd have meetings where we talk about what we were learning and dealing with rejection. And I was on the phones for a while as well. And it was an incredible learning experience. But you don't get that I think you do now more, but back in those days, you didn't get that. As you say, it was, can you talk? Can you speak in English? Get on the phone, which was harsh, very harsh.
With your podcast, because I know you do interviews and I know you have a fantastic style and the conversations that you have, but you also do solo. And even though now I have the Podfather, I do the solo ones as well. But I remember at the start when I was even just kind of doing the introduction, it felt so strange for me, because when you're having a conversation, it's like if they're next to you or whatever, it's all, enjoyable. But when you're doing the solo, and I'm just curious, like, you do brilliant solos, like it's like you alternate. And I'm just wondering, was it difficult for you at the start?
It was interesting. At the beginning, I was totally on the back foot because I had all the technical stuff. I had no clue. So that made me feel quite shaky, because I was at a point in my life where I was a fairly capable person. So being in a situation where I was not capable was a bit of a shock to the system. And then when I started recording the solos, I would be in my guest room in my house with a microphone by myself. Nobody else knew I was recording. And I'd be terrified, which is insane because no one knows I'm recording. I can throw it out if it's no good. Right. And I remember this kind of thing that would happen where I'd be there holding the mic. And I was recording on GarageBand at the time. So I wasn't looking at myself on Zoom as I was doing it. And there'd be the moment of a bit like jumping in a swimming pool. That moment of throwing myself into the experience. And a bit like, you're a Toastmaster, so you know what it's like to walk up on the stage and stand there and start to speak to people. Is that there's a kind of a leap in the body that goes, right, ready, go, oh, and then start. And I began to get used to that feeling. And that feeling took less time after each time. And then I started to get into this thing of talking as though everyone is responding, as though we are actually having a conversation. Just imagining that we are actually having a conversation, even though I'm the only one talking. And that really helped me. And I picked that up from one of my favorite podcasters, whose name is Dave Smith. He does Part of the Problem. He's also on Legion of Skanks, which is too vulgar for me, but I like Part of the Problem. But he will do a solo, and you'd think he was you'd think he was in a conversation, because he keeps referring it to it, and we're discussing this. And you go, yeah, we are. And I'm like, hold on. So that kind of progressed. And then I got into it more, and eventually I got comfortable with it. And it was after that that I then started having guests. So I did about 30 solos first, because that's what I could cope with. I couldn't cope with guests to begin with. And then I was like, okay, now I feel, and then I had the same thing with guests. Oh God, as a guest, right? The same thing.
But I think it's a case of a lot of times when we have the fear, just jump in and just do it, and you just get better and better. I mean, like I remember even with the Toastmasters, I said, I'm going to do everything. I waited 6 months before I did an evaluation, which is basically when somebody speaks, you're evaluating, because I was terrified of it. But once I'd done it, I just kept doing it. And it was like, why was I scared? I don't know. It didn't make sense, but that was the fear that I had.
That's right. And the thing I find is, the thing with fear is, this is how I see it. Fear is the ego trying to stop you from doing something, because the ego doesn't want you to do it. And it doesn't want you to do it either because it thinks you might fail, or because it knows that you're going to grow. It doesn't want you to grow. It wants you to stay the same, it wants you to stay safe. Because if you grow, you're going to express yourself and be free and not controlled by the ego. So that's how I see it, that very often that's what the fear is. And I feel like I'm saying to my ego, I'm saying, thank you for the warning. I'll take it from here. You go and have a lie down. I'll need you later, but I don't need you right now. That's kind of what goes on within me. And so I've discovered that whether I've got fear going on makes no difference. I can do it. I can still do it. The fear doesn't mean I can't do it. I think that's the uncoupling people need. Because the fear makes you think you shouldn't be doing it or you can't do it. Often the fear means you should be doing it and you can do it. And the fear is the energy that helps you keep it alive and not just become a dead presentation. Because that's the last thing I want. Last thing I want is to feel nothing and be a dead presentation. That's not what I want to do.
I used to always kind of tell myself that when I have this kind of nervousness, which kind of goes away after a while, whether it was at the start with the podcasting or on stage or doing anything, I just said it means I care. And that's why I'm nervous. And I care because I want to give the best value. And then I kind of use that. So it's really energy, that you're just changing the energy from fear to care.
Yes. Nice. From fear to care. I like that. That's lovely. Yeah, absolutely right.
Pellowah. So a lot of people are like, what's Pellowah?
What is Pellowah? And even people who've been working with Pellowah for a while will also say, what is Pellowah? Because if you're familiar with the idea of source energy, the idea of the source of all the energy that surrounds us and supports us and moves through us. And if we call that source energy, some people would call that God or the Great Spirit, or whatever you might call it. But I like to call it source energy. So and there are different kinds of energy. Some energies are more dense than others. Some are more fine than others. And Pellowah is a very fine, pure energy, which when you activate it, it comes from source and connects with the recipient of the Pellowah. And it connects with that person's consciousness. And the Pellowah energy and the person's consciousness make a contract together. And the purpose of that contract is to give that person the consciousness shift that they need for their next step in their own personal expansion. So, wow. That's not.
Mic drop.
So how I came across it, I was having lunch with two really close women friends in South Wales in 2018. One of them was the lady who did my Reiki Masters with me. There was me. And the other one had also done her Reiki Masters with the third woman, right? And So the one who'd also done it with her had just got back from Australia. She's Australian. She'd been away for 15 years. And I said, what have you been doing? And why have I not heard from you? You know, that kind of thing. I love you. Where have you been? And she said, I've been doing Pellowah. I said, what's that? She said, it means radical shift in consciousness. And I had one of those experiences that happen every now and again, which I call like a yes that went through my body, every part of my body, my mind, everything about me just went, I have no idea what that is, but I want to do it. I just instantly had that response. So 10 days later, I was on a workshop with this woman was running the workshop and me and my other friend were the participants. And that was it in her living room. And I learnt what Pellowah was, how it had been developed, how to give a Pellowah treatment. And I had the most fantastic time on those 2 days. And I came off that workshop and suddenly some areas in my life that had been very, very stuck, one of which was trying to move house, began to get unstuck because something inside me had shifted very considerably. My energy had shifted, my psychology had shifted, my emotional stress had gone. You know, I was healing isn't the right word. It's more like a shift. You know, like sometimes we have a shift in consciousness and everything looks different. Things that were really a problem before just aren't nearly so much of a problem. So I just loved it. And I didn't become like a full-time Pellowah practitioner. I did it with clients who were interested. I did a lot of Pellowah exchanges with other Pellowah practitioners, and it was very helpful for me. And I probably wouldn't have started the podcast if I hadn't been working with Pellowah. I don't think I would have had the confidence to do it. I would have had the capabilities, but I wouldn't have trusted myself, I don't think, to do it. And then later I did the teacher training, and I've now run several of the training workshops. I now train other people to be practitioners. So it's a very powerful, beautiful energy modality, if you like, or it's referred to as a consciousness modality. So people get whatever shift it is that they need, which what's very interesting about it as well is that with some modalities, the practitioner is very involved in the way the treatment's done. With Pellowah, it's not that way. It's like the Pellowah is in charge, having contracted with the client's consciousness, and the Pellowah guides the practitioner to move in various ways, but the practitioner does not know why they're being moved in those ways, and they don't know what the client's experiencing, and they don't know what the client gets out of it unless the client tells them. So the practitioner has to let go of their ego. They can't be a hero. They just have to surrender and just let themselves be used as a tool in the delivery of the result that Pellowah was delivering.
Beautiful. And I'm just like, I know on your website you've got different kind of clients that you work with. I'm not sure what part of your journey they were, but just whether you've worked with them or not, because I know there's a lot of facilitators around the world, like with the banks, insurance companies and things like that, or like if they bring in people to perform this, even if it's, because normally director level head boys don't do it, but the way I see we make a shift in the world is like a percentage of these middle management eventually get promoted and then become the board. And if we can make that shift within them, and I'm seeing it with a few people that I've had on that are doing things kind of like workshops in big organizations, corporations, that a lot of people are kind of going, oh, look, they're destroying the world. But what's your thoughts on, can we make a change with people learning this, even if it's like, you know, lower middle management, but eventually they'll be the people making the decisions?
I think there are many different ways to affect a large system such as one of those big corporates. I used to work at board level within a division. So, for example, the group operations for Lloyd's TSB before it became Lloyd's Banking Group. So that was like 9,000 people, and it had a board of its own. above that, there's another board, which is the board of Lloyd's TSB, but I would work at the board level of that group of people. And those guys did energy work with me. They did all kinds of personal growth work. They did tarot readings. I mean, they did everything. And they did that because they knew they needed something different, because they were making big changes and they didn't want their people to suffer. They wanted their people to come out of it in a really good state, and they wanted to keep their good people. So they wanted to bring in a really humane leadership. And they understood that to do that, they had to change. They had to become much more self-aware, much more conscious, and much more tuned to things like energy and goodwill and atmosphere and all those things. Now, that made a very big effect in that organization because they were leading it and they had the power to implement things. And I was also teaching them to pass stuff down. So they were teaching people down line what they were doing. So that was the type of intervention I was familiar with and I was good at. I wasn't as good with the middle managers or the lower levels, partly because I was too impatient. You know, you have to sort of, as a facilitator, you have to match yourself with the people that you can best resonate with in terms of like the pace of the work or the intensity of the work. But I also had friends who didn't want to work with those people. With middle management, they were fantastic, much, much better than me. So, and then there are people who work with groups of staff only, and then they are pushing stuff upline in terms of, you know, requests and feedback and stuff. So I actually think every single level is worthy of attention and you know, the gift, spreading the love, you might want to put it. But if you're like a provider, you have to identify where you've got the most leverage, you know, where you're best placed to contribute and work with people, and not try and do the stuff that is not your best work. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
And in terms of Pellowah in particular, because it's just anyone can do it, there are people all over the world in all sorts of levels in companies who are using Pellowah. No one knows they're doing it because they're doing it privately, but it then affects how they go into work the next day.
So I don't know, was it one of your shorts or something like that? There was 5 rhythms dance movement meditation, and I think you mentioned about I can't dance, and I just thought that was nice. I'm not sure if we'll touch on that.
Yes. So when I was a child, we used to muck about dancing around. When I hit adolescence, I became totally self-conscious and couldn't do anything. And then a couple of older girls took us under their wing and taught us a few moves, and then we were okay, right? But then when it was actually when I was doing my master's degree in humanistic psychology, one of the tutors said, "Do you like dancing?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Do you want to come to a dance thing with me?" She said, "There's no alcohol. We're dancing in the daytime and in the evening. You know, it's a conscious thing." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Great. It's a 6-day dance camp in Totnes." She borrowed my husband's tent, and we were dancing all morning every morning and all evening every night for 7 days. And in the afternoon, we were doing like body painting, and if it rained, everyone just ran around in the nude, in the mud. It was these happy days, 1996. And that was 5 Rhythms Dance. And that was 5 Rhythms Dance was developed in California, in Esalen, which you may have heard of, in California in the 70s. An amazing woman called Gabrielle Roth. And it's very much about the 5 rhythms are like the cycle of creative energy. You know, so you start slow, you build up, you crescendo, you come back down, and you reintegrate. And that's the 5 rhythms go through that. I then subsequently trained as a 5 rhythms teacher and taught it for quite some time. And then I went, right, I'm going to let go of that structure now. And when I do conscious dance, I've now got a different way of doing it, which is called being, moving, seeing, which is much more organic. It doesn't have the specific 5 rhythms to it. I mean, I could talk about 5 rhythms a lot, but it's essentially a way of getting into your body, letting go of your head, surrendering whatever you're experiencing to your body and allowing it to come into movement such that things transform, things integrate, things shift, and you are liberated as a result. And a lot of people find it very healing. A lot of people find it really good fun. I go to an ecstatic dance night once a month here locally, and we dance for 2.5 hours on a Saturday night. And it's so much fun, and it's just so releasing, and it's a fantastic community. You know, because everyone's as mad as each other, basically. And you don't, what their name is, but you just dance with them. And you're bonded, you're brothers and sisters forever. And it's a really, really lovely atmosphere, the whole conscious dance world.
The Wayne Valley used to do a thing called A Fest. There's about 6 of them. You know, it's like a 5-day event, different speakers and everything, and they do breathwork and all the different things. But a lot of times in the morning, and not everybody would turn up for this, but they'd have dancing and a good DJ, and obviously everyone is sober. And I think it was the best feeling and just so much fun looking at people and just carefree. Whereas, you know, if you're in the club, you know, even at certain ages, you're paranoid, you're conscious and all that. And it's like just that it's so liberating to not care, and just, you know, everybody is there to uplift each other, and you just feel fantastic for the day afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. It really is a wonderful thing. Yeah. And the book, why people think they can't dance. Because I used to get a lot of people coming up to me when I started saying, yeah, I can't dance. And after a while, and I thought, hold on, there's a small proportion of people who do dance regardless of what's going on. They'll just dance, right? And there's a very small proportion of people who don't dance and never will. And there's a massive chunk in the middle, many of whom think they can't dance. So I started gathering all the reasons that they gave me and wrote the ebook. There was something like 32 different reasons people think they can't dance. And I had an answer for every one of them, which I put into the ebook. And I sent the ebook to my brother, and he started reading it. And he loves dancing, fantastic dancer. Anyway, he got halfway through it and he rang me up and said, Catherine, this is a personal development manual. I went, yeah. He said, I just realized it, and it was too late because I was halfway through it. So, yeah, some people have found that useful.
And just since you mentioned the ebook, you like, I think it's something like 6 that you give away free, which most people are charging for their ebooks and everything, but you've got 6 different ebooks which are free. I don't know, do you want to touch on the subject of each one? But I think it's very nice of you that you're actually doing that.
Thank you so much. Well, I actually, when I wrote those ebooks, I mean, some of them are on Amazon and sometimes people buy one, but when I wrote them mostly because there was something I wanted to say that felt important. And so each one, and if you look at them, you'll see that it's a really eclectic collection. You'll go, how could these be written all by the same person? You know, there's one about how to be a non-exec chairman, you know, what it's like to be a non-exec chairman, right? That they are actually humans. What is a non-exec chairman? You know? And then there's one about dance, and there's one about free thinking and thinking for yourself. And then there's one about transpersonal psychology. And then there's one about why don't the board think for themselves? You know, they're all completely different. And I feel like if someone reads one of those, any one of those, you could read it, you could reflect on it, you could maybe journal around it and read it again, and you could get a lot out of it. You could actually discuss it with somebody else, and you could learn stuff from it. And you could deepen your own reflections and contemplations with any one of those books. Doesn't matter which one. And, you know, my purpose is to help people raise their consciousness. If there are people doing it, reading one of my ebooks for nothing, somewhere in, I don't know, Zimbabwe or California, fantastic.
I love it. Like, I mean, obviously, same with the podcast, because, like, you know, they're free. You're giving so much value. But with these, not everyone does it. But I'm conscious always of, you know, different budgets. And sometimes people say, oh, you can buy a book for $10. $10 could be their disposable income. You know, like some people have nothing, like you say in Zimbabwe, or even in the UK, there's some people that are choosing between heating and feeding themselves. And something like that can just change their consciousness, and then they actually attract things differently, and they see the world as a different place. So it's beautiful that you're doing that.
Thank you so much.
So freedom of spirit.
Aha. This is my baby. Interesting thing. When I started running the Pellowah workshops, my original teacher said to me, Catherine, watch out, because when you run a Pellowah workshop, you still get the Pellowah energy affecting you, but just more than when you have treatment. I went, I believe you. Let's see what happens. So what happens is you're running a workshop, everyone else is learning and having all sorts of shifts. But as you running it, you're having shifts. Pellowah's working on me as the teacher at the same time, which is a really exciting, challenging experience. And people say Pellowah opens the door to what wants to come through, right? And I started getting this messages, insights, whatever you want to call it, saying, Catherine, it's time for you to develop a new workshop, and it's got to be the one that's most personal to you that you've ever done. I was like, okay. And then I did the next workshop. I got this massive kick up the arse. You know, you've got to do it. You've got to do it now. Anyway, I couldn't work out. I thought, okay, I'll do it. I thought, I don't know what it's going to be about. So my friend who's a coach, I said, will you do a session with me? She said, yeah. She said, right, write down all the learning experiences you've had in your life, all the key learnings, what's been most significant for you that's formed you to who you are now. I filled a flip chart page with it, came on the session, started telling her, you know, my childhood, my adolescence, my early 20s, going through all of this, and she won't stop. That's enough. What do you mean? Nope, that's enough for a workshop. She said, everything you've spoken about so far is about freedom. I went, God, you're absolutely right. It's all about freedom. Then I remembered I'd completely forgotten that one time I asked my brother, what do you think is my superpower? And he said, freedom of spirit. So I told her this at this point, and she looked at me, she raised one eyebrow. I went, oh, is the workshop called Freedom of Spirit? She said, it might be. So that's how the original idea came. So I then went, how do I create an experience for people in 2 days that will give them what they need to have to have their own experience of freedom of spirit, where it took me several decades to get that? How do I put that in a weekend? And I realized a lot of what I'd done since my early 20s was learning stuff that would help me to answer that question, that would help me to design this new workshop. So I knew all these different techniques that I could use to help somebody connect with the free spirit that exists inside them, that I believe exists in everybody already, and to release that, to release all the like restrictions and conformities and expectations that we all have on us. If we just sit and talk about that, all we do is realize how trapped we are, and that's depressing. You know, or if you just try and dance it out, you'll feel better for a bit, but then you come back to it. Or if you just, you know, do lots of energy work, you elevate yourself, but you don't necessarily know how to put it in practice in life. So I realized this workshop had to have all those things in it. It had to have the reflection and the understanding and the self-awareness. It had to have the conscious movement to integrate, metabolize, and express. It had to have voice work, so it could come out in the voice and in people's embodiment and manifestation in life. And it had to have connection with energy, because I realized that freedom of spirit is all about love and also connection with universal love. Both are what give us our connection with freedom of spirit. And so I designed a 2-day workshop. I went, oh, Saturday's going to be a long day. Sunday's a normal day. And I realized that it needed to be very playful. Because the first thing that happens if you say to somebody, okay, let's consider the ways in which we are suppressing our freedom of spirit. We go, oh, right, oh, I'm doing this and this and this and this and this. Oh, right. The next thing we automatically do is to say, I'm a bad person for doing that to myself. And that is a really good way of squashing our freedom of spirit. So we have to be aware whilst encouraging ourselves at the same time. And that's hard to do on your own. But in a workshop, you can create an environment where that's what you do, you know, where it's much more lighthearted, but still strong work. So it took me about 5 months to build the workshop, to design this 2-day workshop. I hit a lot of resistance along the way. I had this voice in my head going, yeah, this is nonsense. No one's going to want this. It's just your own self-indulgent crap, you know. And I go, oh, right, okay, I'll take a break. Then I'd come back. And it was just ego trying to stop me doing it, you know. And I'd go, okay, I'll take a break. And I'd come back and I'd look at it and go, it's not bad, you know. And I'd work on it again. And by the time I started running it, I felt like I'd already run it about 15 times. Because as I was building the workshop, I had to experience the experiences that people were going to go through in order to check that it was going to work. So that's freedom of spirit.
Beautiful. I love the name. And I'm just wondering, is the possibility that you can be the trainer to other people, that they can start doing that around the world, like the Pellowah? Because it sounds like the world needs what you're bringing.
Thank you. It's so interesting because when I was creating the workbook for me to deliver it, partway through it, I went, hold on. I'm writing this workbook as if someone else could pick it up and lead the workshop. And that happened before I even started running it. So I knew that I was supposed to teach other people to do it. So I then had a facilitator workbook and a participant workbook. So I've got those now already. So when someone has done the workshop, they then got the option to apply, to train, to teach it. And if they're going to, I already know what that program is. You know, they go back, they do a workshop a second time, but with some, a specific brief about how they do that, because they need to be self-aware and learning it. And then there's some coaching work with me to develop some aspects of themselves. And then there's a facilitator training weekend with the other people who want to do it. And then they will be able to deliver that workshop. And since that, another thing that's come through recently is I've realized I also need to train people to deliver a little one-to-one coaching package, freedom of spirit coaching package. So I'm just now developing that little coaching package. So that's for someone who probably hasn't done the workshop. They might think, the workshop's a bit much for me. Can I just do a little bit of one-to-one work? You know, like a little 3-session thing. So I've just signed up some volunteers for me to test that on, that little coaching package, which will give somebody a connection with freedom of spirit that they can continue to work on. It won't give them what the workshop gives them, but it will give them enough to move down that path. So that's that will be the level 2. So someone can do the workshop, that's level 1. Level 2 is they can learn to do that coaching package. And level 3, they can learn to run the 2-day workshop.
I think even, like if somebody all over, this is, I don't know how many countries, sometimes the podcasts are in over 100 countries,
Yes.
but the thing is, all you have to do is listen to your solo episodes and you learn your skill set and you know what you're doing. Because, as we know, there's some people, they'll go away and they'll do a weekend and they're a coach and then they're promoting themselves as a coach. And there's other people like you have lifelong experience and know how to do it, know how to connect with people. And I think even by just listening to a few of your solos or shows, they'll go, oh, yeah, Catherine knows what she's talking about. She's going to help me. So I think that's what they should, Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the other thing is you can't turn someone into when you're teaching people to do something, you've got to set a boundary around what you are actually able to teach them within a certain limited period of time. Because it used to be the case that if you're going to teach someone any kind of coaching, it's a 3-year course. Nowadays, people don't want that. Some people do, but most people don't, And that's one of the beautiful things with Pellowah, for example. You can do a 2-day workshop, and then you can give people 60-minute treatments and charge for them. from the Monday. You know, you can make back the money of the workshop in a week. You know, so, and with the teacher training, the same thing. So I'm formulating something not quite as quick as that for freedom of spirit, because there's so many moving parts. But yeah.
Is it like I've got the on your website you've got the breakdown of all the different things for the different days and everything. 12 components of self-care, 22 virtues and stuff. Do you want to just touch on maybe one or two things, just to give people, put their toe in the water and just kind of understand a little bit of what would be covered?
Sure. Okay. So the first thing to say is that the first day is about reclaiming sovereignty, and the second day is about embodying that in life. So it's like two phases to it. So in the first day, what were those two things you mentioned there? I might pick one of those.
There was the 12 components of self-care.
Yes, 12 components of self-care. So that's actually adapted from a wonderful book by Barbara Brennan called Hands of Light. She's a very powerful, well-known energy teacher in the US. And these 12 components of self-care, one of them is exercise. One of them is rest. One of them is supportive relationships. There are 12 different elements, if you like. Now, most people, when they look at that grid, first thing they do is they go, oh, I'm not doing enough of this, right? But then at second glance, you can look at that and go, actually, there are some things on there that you are doing really well. What are they? There are some things on there that you'd never even thought of as being self-care, that you just didn't really think of, that you need to really think about. There are some things on there that you've tried to do, but you've had difficulty, let's say. So when somebody looks at that, it enables them to see where they are supporting themselves and supporting their sovereignty and where they're not in that regard. So what that means is they can easily see the things. The first thing is that they can congratulate themselves for the things they're already doing well. And people don't tend to congratulate themselves for these things. Now that's very, very, very important, because the things they're doing well are the things that they're going to use to help them do the other things better, which is the opposite perspective from find out what you're not doing well, berate yourself for that, and then try and fix yourself. And that's just depressing. So we do it the opposite way around. We say, so you are doing, I think there's one on there about personal hygiene and self-care and pampering, that sort of thing. So there might be somebody we say, you do that fantastically. You just look at these products you've got in your bathroom, you have a long bath, you use makeup that doesn't react with your skin, you use mineral shampoo, you're doing all of this. That's self-care. That's really strong. That's really helping you. Okay. Keep doing that. Really enjoy doing that when you're doing it. And then you feel even better about yourself when you tackle some of these other things over here. You see what I mean? And that's just one thing. And those things that are on the website, we don't necessarily work with all of them on the workshop, but they're all in the workbook. And the workbook for Freedom of Spirit is like that thick. So when people take it home, there's a whole back section of stuff they can do on their own. And there's stuff within the thing that they can do on their own. If we didn't do it in the workshop, they can do it on their own. So actually that workbook is designed so somebody could work it for a year if they wanted to, by taking all the different elements. There are exercises and processes and structures in there that they can actually do on their own, or that they can do with someone else who's done the workshop.
Yeah.
Like health warning thing. Don't do this with somebody who hasn't done the workshop, but you can do it with someone who's done the workshop.
Because what most people do when they're creating something like that, they'll have one level And then you do the next level, and then from what you're saying with that book, they'd make about, you have to do 20 different workshops to get through the whole thing. But the fact that you're kind of teaching them and then allowing them. Plus, I suppose, I mean, you mentioned at the start about kind of like the carefree parents, which is fantastic to have that upbringing. I think most people kind of, oh, I wish I had that. But you've got different personalities and different belief systems coming into a group. And I think a group setting is perfect for that, because most of these people surround themselves with similar people, so they get the same kind of reassurance of what they believe in. But when they come into this, like, they're learning something new, but they're also all different personalities, which in turn, I think, allows them to accept it better than if it wasn't done like that.
Completely. And it also means they're able to emotionally support each other. So there's quite a lot of pairs work where you're with a partner and one partner is doing, you're doing an exercise together, and the exercise could be quite challenging to do, but because you're doing it together, you're supporting each other. And then the next one, you do it with someone different. The next one, you do it with someone different. By the end of it, there's this feeling of love, really, that everyone is giving and receiving love in the experience, which is one of the secret ingredients of freedom of spirit. People think freedom of spirit is about being an individual and not caring about anybody else. It's not. True freedom of spirit is about individuality and relationship and community and universal love. It's about all those things. And you're quite right. In a group, you can actually build that and actually feel that in the room. And that feeling stays in the body. And actually, one thing that people get on the second afternoon, we do a lot of very strong meditations on this workshop, as well as the movement work and other things that we do. One of the meditations on the second day is about finding unique anchors and activators. Each person goes within and finds unique anchors and activators that they take with them. They write them down and catch them, and they can use those afterwards to rekindle the experience that they had on the workshop of freedom of spirit. So they can literally reactivate themselves if they're feeling trapped or bored or dull or they've lost it, which can happen to any of us. They can get it back by activating these anchors and activators, which each person has their own unique version of that.
Incredible. So I know I'll have to get you back and go even deeper, because there's so much different things to touch on this. What I would like to, because I was looking at where you have the location. It's actually near enough to, well, I mean, it looked on the map, near enough to Birmingham, because I mean, sometimes people might say, oh, Wales, and where would they fly? But I presume they can go into Birmingham and maybe get a train or a bus or something to get to the location.
I mean, I've had people come from Scotland. One woman drove 6 hours each way to come to this workshop. To be fair, she'd worked with me before, so she knew she would probably get value. Ireland, someone has been there from Ireland. I've had, Wales, England. I haven't had anybody yet from another country, from completely outside of the UK and Ireland. But I've had people from every country in the UK and Ireland come to it. But people will, if someone wants to do a weekend workshop, they will travel. And this is a fantastic location anyway for people going on holidays. Beautiful. We're in Wales. It's fantastic scenery, big skies. It's just beautiful. Sometimes people come and spend some extra days visiting friends and going to Hay on Wye, going to the bookshops. It's going to the waterfalls, there are these sacred sites all around Wales that you can go to, meditate, read, write. It's a fantastic spot.
And both of them, the Pellowah and that, are they all just for adults, or do you kind of have adolescents as well?
I only have adults at mine because people need to at least theoretically be able to take responsibility for themselves 100%. I know that's debatable for some of us. But there are people who run these sorts of things for younger people. But again, that's not a particular... I've done a little bit of work with younger people, but I haven't really grounded myself in it deeply enough to feel, to offer it to those people.
I mean, anyone that from the international countries, why not go there for a week, do the weekend, and then they've got time to explore Wales and look at the beautiful scenery.
Yeah. I mean, I've got, funnily enough, a host. I went on someone's podcast as a guest, and this lady is in the US. And at the end of the episode, she said, okay, two things. One, that was fantastic. Two, how do I get a Pellowah treatment? So we arranged that she had a Pellowah treatment. She loved it, changed her life. Well, the timing was perfect. She's now considering, because she and her husband are coming over to the UK at some point, she's considering coming to the Pellowah workshop, because it's not running in the US. Pellowah. It started
I
in
mean,
spring.
I've got a big US listenership. It's a good business opportunity. So why not go from the US, go over there,
Yeah.
learn it, and go back, and then you've got a decent business that will actually make the world a better place.
Yes, well, they could come to me to do their practitioner training. Then they can go to Australia and do their teacher training, and then take it to the US. And I would love for that to happen. I mean, that's how it started in the UK. That the workshop I did in the UK was, I think, the second one in the UK. And Julie, who ran it, then went, I think my mission now is to bring this to the UK. And she trained 400 teachers in 6 years, 400 practitioners in 6 years. And then she contacted the founder of Pellowah in Australia and said, I've got 52 people who want to train as teachers. Will you come to the UK and train them? Coordinated it. And that's what happened. She single-handedly manifested it in the UK. Incredible.
Right.
She's having a bit of a lie down now.
But that's fantastic. I mean, you know, how you feel after kind of creating that, because like not only the amount of teachers that she's created, but the lives that have been affected by each teacher, a ripple effect that she will never know him or whatever, might never meet him. And then not only that person, but that person who might have been the problem in a household then goes back, becomes a different person. So there's and even another ripple again inside that household and with their families and cousins and things. Yeah.
I know, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, you could say the same thing about podcasting. I mean, this podcast of yours, the beautiful thing, you just don't know how many who's affected and how. And I think this is a very important part of our culture in the world at the moment. And, you know, I think about what I call the Great Awakening. I feel like we're collectively in a great awakening at the moment. And things like your podcast, Pellowah, Freedom of Spirit, all these other things people are doing, I feel these things are alive now because there are people who are ready to offer them, and there are people who are ready to receive them and take them into their lives and spread them. And I find that so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, Catherine, you might let people know where they can find you.
Totally. So my website is beingspace.world, and my podcast is truthandtranscendence.com. And I'm always happy to hear from people. You can just call me out of the blue if you want to. You don't have to go through a special process. So yeah, do check those out. And thank you so much, Roy. It's been such fun talking to you about this today.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll make sure I'll put the links both on the audio and the video.
Lovely.
That's all for the Meditation Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share it with your friends, and make sure you go to Truth and Transcendence and give that a thumbs up and a 5-star rating as well. And start listening, especially the solo shows. They're very good. Until next week, take care.